Hi, Nikki White, the Karma Coach, talking to you now about karma, one of my favorite subjects. You can tell by the name. Karma for me is about lessons that we are trying to learn through many different lifetimes and perhaps through also ancestral karma, family karma. There are lots of different types of karma. And generally, when you approach a point where you need karmic essences, you're really feeling pretty stuck. Something keeps coming around again and again and again. And no matter how many perhaps other essences you take or other approaches you take, other therapies you use, it just doesn't seem to shift. And that's when you really need to look down at the level of cellular memory, if you like. So you're looking at lifetimes you may have lived before, or burdens that your unresolved karma that your family have passed down to you unwittingly. They weren't able to heal it and or finish the lesson, and so it comes down to you to have to do it. And karmic essences, I have split into nine main themes because these are the ones that most people are tackling, really, or at the root of a lot of really difficult situations in our lives. One is a general cleansing essence, and that will help you with anything that, as I say, is very stuck, very deep, perhaps doesn't have a particular focus or theme. But that's but you just have this feeling that this is a really deep thing and you need to get to the bottom of it. In which case, karmic cleansing is a good one, even to begin with, if you feel a little uncertain about whether you can pinpoint exactly what the problem is. The next one is karmic fear. And karmic fear is a really, it's really at the root of most of our problems. Suffering comes from resisting what is, and we tend to go into resistance when we're frightened of something, even if we don't know what it is, even if it's so deep and buried. All we can come up with is I just feel really uncomfortable around this, or I keep putting off doing something, and you don't know why. It's nearly always down to some level of fear, some old memory that gets triggered whenever you think about trying to do something, or you know you've got to take an action, and you'll start cleaning the bathroom, or getting on the web and surfing around anything to avoid whatever it is, because it just brings up something, and you can't perhaps put your finger on what, but that's usually karmic fear, and it's also often at the bottom of self-sabotage. So if you keep getting to the same point with something, and you're about to finally make that final step to move on, and something always seems to happen to stop you, that's also not nearly always karmic fear. You'd rather sort of sabotage yourself quite unconsciously, and go back to the familiar difficult place you're in than move on and face the fear. It's so deep and so terrifying. So the one after that is forgiveness. Forgiveness is a really important karmic lesson for all of us. And as the cliche has it, when you when you refuse to forgive somebody, it's like drinking poison yourself and then hoping they'll die. Actually, the person who suffers when you don't forgive is yourself, and that can really lead to all sorts of problems. You'll have all this resentment boiling around in you, and perhaps distrust and really difficult emotions that make it hard for other people to relate to you. It can make you quite unapproachable, quite bitter. It can have a horrible effect on your physical body as well. If you hang on to unforgiveness and you feel wronged, go into victimhood, that's very disempowering as well. So um, forgiveness is an important one to sort out. If you can, once you take karmic forgiveness, you can begin to release the feeling of being wronged, the feeling of needing to blame others, and that can really set you free. It's because forgiveness, hanging on to feeling wronged, it keeps you really stuck in a very limited place, because it's almost like, well, I'm not going to open the door of my cage and fly free and be happy because I want the other person to see how much I'm suffering. Well, they probably don't care. They're probably getting on with their life. So live your life, free yourself, and take some forgiveness at a karmic level, and you will find that life suddenly opens up for you. Um, the next two karmic essences are grief and trauma and guilt and self-judgment. Now, both of these essences, where I have a service called personal guidance, where you can order an attunement from me, where I will sit down and look at all the different essences of it I've created through my life and that are on my website, and will ask my guides which of those is most suitable for you right now. And of all the essences, I would say these two, um, grief and trauma and guilt and self-judgment, are the ones that come through most often, because they are, grief and trauma. If you are suffering at a really deep level from a grief and trauma that are very buried, you'll find that you, for example, cry tremendously at a sad film, or something that pretty much anything that's sad or tricky. Maybe you find it impossible to watch certain things on the television. It really makes you, react very strongly. Um, Perhaps you notice that you disengage and you numb out when certain things happen. It might be that you simply are freeze and you can't react or move or something when you hear a particular noise or a particular piece of music, or something happens, or you see something that reminds you of something in the past. You might not be terribly aware of it, but you just suddenly feel intensely anxious. These are, and grief as well, and trauma are both things that are very commonly handed down from our family line. So this is very often ancestral and family karma, as well as our own, from our own childhood, that we're trying to deal with. So very often, if in our family line we had, for example, a lot of wartime trauma, um, there wasn't time or space or the expertise usually available to deal with trauma in wartime. We just kind of had to stiffen our upper lip and get on with it. But that meant an awful lot got buried. And if we don't deal with it, we pass it down. So, we've been through, certainly in the Western world where I am, been through two, not terribly, you know, we've been through two world wars that were both within, living memory for some people, and certainly recent enough to be very much affecting the current generations, in terms of what we've handed down, and also the experience we've had of parenting and grandparenting by people who might have been very traumatized by war. So that will affect your own emotion ability to emotionally respond and to regulate your own emotions. So grief and trauma can be a good one if you recognize that as a pattern for you. Um, the next one is guilt and self-judgment. Um, Guilt and self-judgment is really poisonous. It allows you to be manipulated. If you feel guilty, you have a sense that whatever you're doing is wrong, and uh, you have to do the right thing to make up for that in some way, to atone. And people around you, whether they know it or not, can play on that. You can be guilt tripped, you can have a tremendous need to please people, but it's at the cost of your own peace and well-being. You'll start to feel resentful and fed up that you're having to spend a lot of your time doing things you don't want to. It might be very difficult for you to say no to people. And that also makes it difficult for people um, to relate to you in a happy way, because if you're constantly feeling resentful and fed up, it doesn't make you great company either. So it's in everyone's interest to release this pattern. Um, it also means also guilt and self-judgment will disconnect you from who you really are, because instead of being able to give an authentic response when someone says, would you do this, would you like to do that, you'll be looking for the response that's going to pacify people, or make people feel, oh, approve of you, and then you're not being your real self, and then that becomes a vicious cycle, because if you don't feel you're being real with people, then you'll also feel that your friends and people who say they love you aren't really, they wouldn't really love me if they knew who I was underneath all of this people pleasing. So then you feel unworthy, and then you go into self-judgment all over again. So it becomes this vicious cycle. So releasing yourself from that cycle is really important, and the self-judgment and guilt essence blend will really help with that. The next one is lack of abundance. So karmic lack of abundance will come from any kind of karmic issues around money, and money gets imprinted as an energy very easily with very strong emotion, particularly karmically, because it will come down through your family, through your ancestors, and also through your experience of your parents when you were young, and their attitude to money and what money did to their relationship. And that may or may not be, have been a very happy experience. And also looking back, I mean, I'm lucky I'm in the West, and we, generally speaking, are a little bit more affluent than we were several generations ago. But it wasn't so very, very long ago that people couldn't, money, not having money actually meant life or death. You could die of starvation. You might have had to give up a child because you couldn't afford to raise it. Um, you might have not been able to get married to someone you love dearly. Maybe you even had to marry someone you really didn't like because the family needed you to marry someone who had money. There are all sorts of ways that money can totally distort your happiness, and it can carry that energy through generations to the point where you may unconsciously be saying, "Well, I'm not going there. I'm not making money important in my life." Um, and or you might say, well, I'm associating money unconsciously, perhaps with exploitation, with people who, if back in your family line there were serfs, there were slaves, there were people who were completely powerless because they didn't have any money, then money, can also have a very negative connotation for you. And unfortunately, just by avoiding it or not dealing with it or not making it important doesn't actually help. It's really important to go and look at the beliefs you might have around it, and become aware of them, accept them, and release them. And that's what you'll be able to do if you take this lack of abundance essence. Things will become much more apparent to you around what's, as you take it, about how you feel about money, and perhaps any lack of, feeling unworthy of receiving it. The next one is karmic loneliness. Loneliness is often caused by a distrust of other people, which often comes out of experiences of betrayal or disloyalty, or people letting you down, people not being there for you at important moments in your life, so that you get thrown back on yourself, and you tend to think, well, I'll have to manage, I just have to cope. There's nobody there for me, so I'm just going to, I'll manage. And you have that attitude through your life, and it makes it very difficult for other people to approach you and to access you in a way that they can offer help, because you're just not open to it. You've just shut that down. And people, if you need this essence, you might find that you either constantly have to be around people, or you might have done the opposite, and you might have a pattern of withdrawing from people and appear quite aloof and quite unapproachable to other people, because you've got your guard up all the time. Or perhaps you're in, when you are in company, you simply don't connect at a certain, below a certain level, and you just stay on the surface with people. But this is a good one for that, and this essence, and also it helps you to become more present, because when we are lonely, we often just disconnect from what's going on around us, and we get into this bubble. You can be in a crowded room with a group of people, and everyone seems to be having a great time. They're all smiling and laughing, and you are in your own bubble thinking, what's up with me, because I just don't feel happy, and other people around me seem to be very relaxed and cheerful, and I don't feel like that at all. And I don't think anyone noticed if I was here or not. And if you have those sort of feelings, that's a disconnection, and an inability to connect at a meaningful level with other people, that makes you feel actually the oneness that we should be feeling with other people, because we are, at the end of the day, all one. And the other aspect of karmic loneliness will help you to connect with the source within you, because fundamentally, if you find it difficult to be alone with yourself, um, there is probably a disconnect from source. Because if you are comfortable with yourself, if you are able to accept yourself and love yourself as you are, then there's no problem being in your own company. It tends to be when if you're left alone in your own company and you haven't dealt with the demons in your head that keep, telling you horrible things about yourself, old voices from the past, then that can be a problem. So karmic loneliness will help you to reconnect with the divine being that you are and help you to become, therefore, more present, more able to be with yourself and relaxed with yourself and enjoy your own company, which will be a big asset in your life. Um, the penultimate karmic essence is power. Karmic power is needed when we don't fundamentally trust our own integrity. We might push away opportunities to have power or to wield power because we are worried that we may exploit that. We might not be able to trust ourselves in acting in the right way, or we push off the need to take responsibility or decisions onto others, and cast ourselves instead perhaps as more victim. Because when we don't take responsibility for our own power, we will eventually become a victim of other people, and their power, and we will feel helpless and powerless. And one of the important uh, things about this, it can also be about feeling that you can actually hold your power and be with people in a way that is inclusive, in a way that's collaborative, in a way that takes on board other people's desires, and yet still be able to feel comfortable in your own expression of who you really are. It will also help you to get to know your fears, because if you're not aware of what makes you scared, and the areas that you feel uncomfortable in, then it's going to be very easy to give away your power in those areas. So, for example, I don't know, if you don't feel very comfortable around money, then whenever that topic comes up, you might suddenly shrink and lose your power because you just think, oh well, everyone around me seems to know far more about this than me, and I don't feel very expert in this. So karmic power is a great one if you need to bring your power back into your life, particularly there might be a particular area where you really know you lose it and you suddenly become very kind of childlike, perhaps. Um, Relationships is the last karmic essence, and that is about becoming more at home with your masculine and feminine aspects. I'm not talking about what gender you may be, or what gender your parents might be either, but you will tend to notice the interplay of yin and yang, masculine and feminine energy first in your parents as a child, and therefore that might give you an idea of how those energies operate with each other. And unfortunately, quite often our parents weren't, in an ideal relationship. There may have been disrespect of the masculine, disrespect of the feminine. There may have been quite a lot of conflict between them. Maybe one was very dominant, and that might then play out within yourself. Quite unconsciously, unless you've gone and done some work on yourself and become more aware. So this essence is going to help you um, to understand better your own relationship with your masculine and your feminine energy. And if you can do that, and if you can bring both of those energies to become more respectful of each other and listen to each other and allow the feminine energy to really express itself and be creative, and the masculine energy to give that respect when it wants to come in and focus things and create a container for the feminine energy, then you will feel much more comfortable in your own relationship with yourself, and you will be much easier to have a relationship with other people as well, because they are going to be able to connect with you, and understand you better, because you will have hopefully attained a greater understanding of yourself. And it usually brings a lot more peace, this essence as well, because those two voices like your old mother and father voices in your head will calm down, and you will be able to bring some peace to that, and that will help you to relax. Um, and you'll be able to be more cooperative, and there'll be less power struggles in your life. So that's my quick overview of the Karmic Essence range. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you again in another video.